everything that you're looking at in the room you're sitting in is the product of magic. Well, what do I mean by that? Because there's levels of magic. So what I mean by that is that everything, like I'm sitting at a desk right now, and the desk that I'm sitting at, this desk, somebody conceived it in their mind. And now here's a desk. Something that was completely intangible is now tangible. That's magic. I know it sounds so basic, so fundamental to reality that you don't think of it that way. But in a way, that's what magic is. Magic is the art of bringing intangibleness into tangible expression. And in this case, it's a very tangible thing. It's tangible in the sense that it's a table. And so sometimes you'll hear the term white magic versus black magic, or soul magic versus personality magic. Well, most of the things that we look at in the room are probably more personality driven. In other words, the lower self, it too is a creative agent. It too is a magician of sorts. And if it's a very selfish personality in its creative endeavor, that's where the term black magic is kind of rooted in. You could call that selfish magic, where the magic of the soul is selfless magic. It's completely dedicated to serving the larger whole, serving the larger whole. And what we're really talking about is that the ability to align vertically with the higher promptings of the soul and the ashram beyond. And so there's a verticalness to it, but there's also a horizontalness to it in the sense of expression. So it's all about living the vertical life while expressing in the horizontal dimension of life. It's one of the many crosses that are present in the evolution of human consciousness. So that verticalness is the key, though, to beginning the process. The soul seeks to do this. It's like I said at the beginning, it's part of its essential destiny is to work through that personality. It needs the personality. It needs the mental body of the personality to shape the actual thoughts that it's trying to intuitively convey. Because remember, intuition in the highest sense is utterly 100% formless. And yet, a thought is a form. In fact, we call it a thought form. So in a way, the whole magic is the mystery of how does a formless intuition become a thought form? How does something formless take form? And that's why I said sometimes it's called the art of thought form building, And so there's the idea here is that the personality is going to provide the instrument, you might say, the instruments, three of them, mental, emotion, physical, to actually externalize this new and progressive idea that you inwardly sense. And the first step is to create a thought about it. But nonetheless, it's just this understanding that there's a process of how does a thought form, how is it created? How is it created? That to be an effective magician, we need to follow the Delphic injunction to know thyself. And to know thyself means to recognize these different dimensions of ourselves as we function and try to serve. So it needs that mental body to create the thought form, but then it also needs the emotional body of the personality, because the emotional body is what will give to the new created thought form, you might say. It'll give to it a kind of emotional warmth, and it'll help the thought form become more coherent and attractive. You're much more likely to manifest a good idea if you have a measure of emotional conviction associated with it, as opposed to an idea with no emotion, that's dry, it doesn't have it. So there's something about it. It both makes the thought form attractive, but it also gives it a kind of vitalness. So it adds a kind of push power to help in the manifestation. So that's important to keep in mind. So the emotional part of it is very important. Of course, The question is, how much emotion? How much emotion? That's part of the science of this. It's not just, oh, I got to give, I want to add feeling to my thought form. It's how much. Because you know how it is. If you give something too much emotion, you can distort it. It becomes exaggerated, and we don't want that. So there's a kind of science of measuring that. By the way, I should mention that each of these layers, mental, emotional, and physical, each of them have danger points along the way. In the creative process, there are danger points. For instance, there are in each of the phases of this creative process, there are places in it where the lower self, the personality, in its independent nature, tries to wiggle its way in and becomes more potentially influential at that part of the creative process. So one of the things that is really important to understand about the magical process is that we have to learn how to tame the personality so that it recognizes that it's a mere servant to the soul rather than an independent agent. Because the personality in its history has always believed it's an independent agent. And now we've got to slowly transform the personality so that it becomes a cooperative servant on behalf of the soul. And that's a big part of the path. I mean, that's such a fundamental principle, friends, in this whole philosophy, is the transformation of the personality so that it tempers the ego of the personality and transforms the personality so that it becomes the rightful recipient and servant to the greater life that is the soul within. In a way, what is happening is slowly the soul is trying to rebuild your lower self so that it's composed of, you might say, mental, emotional, and physical substance that is more useful and helpful and cooperative and receptive to the soul's creative endeavor and creative intention. When we talk about the magical process as it pertains to the physical dimension, which is kind of the final step, there are kind of two things to keep in mind. It's both your physical nature. In other words, here is where the soul will actually utilize certain chakras and a certain sequence of chakras to engage them in order to be more effective in the outer expression. But also the physical world and how we interface with the physical world and those we interface with. So it's trying to, the creative process at this point, which is sort of the end of the creative process, is both a process of readying the physical instrument to bring it forward, to bring the new idea forward, but also understanding how to be effective in that process as it pertains to the people you try to touch.